Welcome folks. Now, I know I'm not the only one who's wondered about the past lives of the Espada. Today's theory video is looking at the inspiration, potential inspirations, and physical characteristics to guess at who or what the Espada were in their past lives as human. Three Espada will not be talked about, and that is Baragan, Ukiora, and Xayalaparo. I explained why in the previous week's video, so check that theory video out for more information. Also, heavy content warning, we will be discussing things like unaliving, death, and violence. So with that, like and subscribe, guys. Let's go. Starting off, we're going to go with Yammy Llargo. Yammy was partly the inspiration for this video alongside Harribel, and that was because I thought Yammy said, "It's been a long time since I've been to the world of the living," during his debut in the manga, but in actuality, he only said, "I've been here only a couple times while wearing a mask, but the human world is more boring than I remember." So there isn't too much to glean from that, and I had to kind of rework this section to fit the video. So just moving on to what I think Yammy was in his first life, the only thing we can honestly glean from Yammy is that he speaks Spanish, or at least his favorite catchphrase is suerte, which is Spanish for luck. So if the world of the living was more exciting and his favorite word is in Spanish, I assume Yammy lived around a warring time in either Spain or Mesoamerica's history. His res may also give a hint as to what he is and may help narrow what time period. So, Yammy is dumb, we know that. He even prefers to use hand-to-hand combat as opposed to a weapon, which leads me to believe he's very old-fashioned and doesn't like using tools, sort of like an ancient or early civilized man. When looking at his res, we see his first form is an ankylosaurus dinosaur-like creature. Doesn't tell us much, so let's keep looking. Then, when he gains power and becomes enraged, he grows into a large, red fur, ape-like creature, which seems to me like Gigantopithecus, which was an abnormally large red-furred ape that lived in Asia. This may be a hint at evolution, conceptually implying he's old and primitive and has been around a long time, but unfortunately there isn't anything else to really back this up, and we have conflicting origins for these concepts. The only way I could explain him being around long and not being that strong is Yammy regressing while he was in Adhucha, back into a Gillian due to a lack of food. We know it can happen because Adhucha are constantly worried about it and constantly have to eat. Between his size and lack of a human figure in his res, this implies he never reached the Vastalorde status, which could explain this lack of intelligence, and would explain why he can actually gain power, because he used to have a lot of power and regressed while he was a Gillian. There are large giants in Mesoamerican mythology, and this may be where Kubo got it from, and there was writings of semi-giants in New Spain in the 1500s, so this is where Yammy probably died and became a hollow. I say this because Yammy is abnormally large even in his Arrancar form, and he becomes even bigger in his res form. Unfortunately, there isn't too much to tie together here, as Yammy has many different aspects, seemingly from different places. Moving on to Aaroniero Arruerie. Aaroniero is so difficult at first. I thought conjoined twins because of their comment about their faces, but the two heads are male and female respectively, and conjoined twins cannot be different sexes. Then I was like, some kind of chimera human hybrid because of the res form, but then the res form probably only looks that way because of everything it's absorbed. The only thing I can think of is Aaroniero is from at least the 20th century. Aaroniero was still a Gillian when it became an Arrancar, and with the glass vial containing its head, the architect Aaroniero is based on is known for sci-fi-like creations, so he has to be young. But honestly, I'm stumped. The music didn't even give me a hint either. So if anyone has any good ideas for Aaroniero, I'd love to hear it. Moving on to Zommari Rereaux. This is where I can finally give a solid answer for who I thought Zommari was. Zommari Rereaux is an interesting case because he comes from so many different places, but they relate together unlike Yammy. His first name comes from Mary Eugenie Lillynette, who's a Thai-French singer whose nickname is Zom, also known as Zommari or Zommari. His last name is Rereaux, which the closest I could see was the French Louisiana Cajun monster, the Rougarou, which is a cannibalistic humanoid who would, you guess it, eat human flesh, not unlike hollows. Going even deeper, the song Kubo chose to represent Zommari is Witch Doctor by the composer Hiroki Kikuta. Witch doctors can be attributed to multiple cultures, but probably the most known is the famous Haitian voodoo priest known as Hungun. You see the witch doctor motif in Zommari's bone necklace and earrings that make up the remnants of his mask, which show a popularized Western interpretation of the witch doctor look. I think Zommari might have been John Domingo, aka the Black Constable, who was a notorious hoodoo man and necromancer in Charleston, South Carolina, USA, in the 1880s. After the abolition of slavery in the United States in 1865, racism and racist hunting parties were at an all-time high, and yet it was claimed that these parties even feared and avoided John Domingo, and this protection would extend to those around him. He was a known necromancer, someone who could raise, speak with, and control the dead. These zombie curses are rather popular and are known to be an administration of a combination of psychoactive substances, oftentimes the paralyzing pufferfish venom, tetrodotoxin, and the strong deliriant Datara. He was also most famous for his love potions. It's all starting to sound familiar, huh? John Domingo was noted to be a good man who only sought to punish bad people and was noted to keep to himself, not unlike Zommari. John was even noted to have dominion over or sovereignty over the weather and other natural aspects, which reflects Zommari's speech to Byakuya about how his Amour ability worked. Zommari very well may have been this John Domingo, and what I believe furthers this is John's death was claimed to be that he died very suddenly and terribly while making bold and arrogant proclamations. That death and imagery sounds very similar to Zommari's, doesn't it? I think this is likely who Zommari was as a human and who Kubo based him on. There's more I could go into here, but I'll just stop here. Grimmjow Jaggerjaquez. If you saw the thumbnail, I think you know where this is going. So Grimmjow's first name stems from that of Nicholas Grimshaw, and an English architect noted for modernist buildings. His last name, Jaggerjaquez, comes from a Swiss watch and clock manufacturer called Jaeger LeCoultre. I think most important thing to note from that is part of LeCoultre's name. Jaeger means hunter or huntsman, also one attending a person of rank or wealth and wears a hunter's costume. Both of those are important to Grimmjow's personality. One, that Grimmjow's instinct to hunt often overrides his base personality, and the mentioning of the word king triggers that personality shift, clearly created by the rank part of the description of what a Jaeger is. Furthermore, when we take a look at Grimmjow's resurrection, its Zanpakuto name is Panthera. Panthera is a genus of large wild cats in the mammalian family, Felidae. It includes the four well-known living species of the lion, Panthera leo, the tiger, Panthera tigris, the jaguar, Panthera onca, and the leopard, Panthera pardus. The jaguar is where we focus because Grimmjow's insatiable hunting nature and his res form design, I think, was an Aztec jaguar. Of all of the Aztec warriors, they were the most feared alongside the eagle warriors. They were the only such classes which did not restrict access solely to the nobility, as commoners were allowed to join this military sect. Grimmjow may have been a prince or a king who was usurped from his spot, which would explain his trigger king word. Moving on to Nnoitra Gilga. Nnoitra is an interesting case. I think Nnoitra's physical design was of several warriors in history. One inspiration may have been Benkei. Benkei armed himself with 7 weapons and is often depicted carrying these on his back. One of the weapons was a scythe. Many give him the attributes of a demon, a monster child with wild hair and long teeth. In his youth, Benkei may have been called Onikawa, which means demon or ogre child, and was said to stand 6.6 feet tall. Benkei was a rogue who sought to take 1,000 swords and was on a 999 win streak. Sounds like Nnoitra. What's even more interesting is Benkei died on his feet in battle. That is something that Nnoitra himself also wanted to do. I think one of the others was a Chinese warrior named Zhao Dun, who was a one-eyed warrior who by legend lost and devoured his left eye. And finally, Date Masamune. Date was a ruthless warrior and daimyo in Japan who lost his eye, and after this loss, his mother saw him as unfit to be heir and attempted to kill him in favor of his brother. Date would go on to kill her and his own brother and relentlessly conquer and slaughter enemies and even allies whom he believed wronged him. His kabuto was adorned with a large golden crescent, and he had a very loyal retainer named Katakura Kagetsuna, which would be Tesla in this situation. So I think Nnoitra Gilga might actually have been Date Masamune in his human life. I decided on this because Date himself never got to die on the battlefield. He died from esophageal cancer. This would have probably left him in a state of despair before his death, leading him to becoming a hollow after this and later the Nnoitra we know. His distaste for his mother could have rolled over and manifested in his dislike of Nell and Tir Harribel. This one honestly might be the most obvious. Tir Harribel was a woman who either lost a child or died for her child. There are two main reasons I say that. One, her concept of death is sacrifice, along with her animal representation as a shark. Those are important because as observed in multiple species of shark embryos will eat each other while in utero as a food source to survive. This could be viewed as a sacrifice to increase the odds of the other embryo surviving. Her hollow hull is located where her uterus would be, as told to us through the Unmasked data book. This furthers the link to the shark fact and her possible hint at her past as a mother who lost something. And the second thing is, as noted in Camp for Your World Volume 3 by Neliel, Tir Harribel has a soft spot for children or things that look like children. This backs up what I said earlier, but this could also point to another possibility of a female who desired to have kids but died before she could. So personally, I think Tir, while human, was a woman who died during complications during childbirth, but I believe she knew this was a possibility and decided to sacrifice herself anyway to give her potential child a future. I would have said maybe she saved her child from a sunken ship and sharks, but that might be too on the nose. So, due to dying under such a strenuous nature and wanting to see her child grow, she stayed watching over her. Eventually, she would slip into despair, become a demi-hollow, and hollow. Very similar to Sora Inoue, Orihime's older brother. Now, I'm not sure if she would have the restraint to avoid eating her child, but seeing as her personality dominated strongly enough within a mass of other hollows to be a Gillian, I would say she found restraint. Plus, she rejects the concept of eating other souls to gain strength. There aren't very many hollows with that level of restraint. Plus, eating her child would have been too dark, and nothing in Harribel's character shows she's grieving or has that level of self-hatred. Outside of that, I can't infer too much. Nothing about her gives away her age or what time period she could have been human. And finally, Coyote Stark and Lillynette Gingerback. This one I was debating a lot because I love Stark and Lillynette. They are my favorite hollow or Rancor, Espada, whatever, and I wanted to do the character justice, but I think it's pretty obvious. People often forget they are not actual separate beings who are hollows. They were one creature who became two whole beings later. I think the being that comprised Stark and Lillynette as a human probably lived around 1607 to 1912 in the United States. I say this because of what they split into in their names. And Kubo probably based the two characters on the concept of loneliness and the found father/child trope. Oftentimes in this trope, two characters who have either lost something or are lonely find comfort in each other. Usually one is pure, and it's normally the child, while the other is a much older, grizzled man who's seen too much and doesn't want to open up. I believe Stark and Lillynette easily fall into this category, as Lillynette is always trying to make Stark feel better or pushing him to be more open. Going back to the names, although hollows take on a different name when they become hollows, I think the names here give us a clear hint because they give it to themselves after they become a Rancor, or basically more human. The original being, while human, judging from the time frame I came up with, was most likely mixed indigenous and European. Native American naming traditions vary depending on each particular tribe. Yes, I know Stark was partly named after Philippe Stark, but I don't think that excludes this concept but strengthens it because of the mixed heritage. Typically, native names are derived from nature, represented by an animal symbolizing desirable characteristics or a certain trait. A Native American name gives us an insight into the personality of the one who possesses it. Let's examine Lillynette and Stark's names. Lillynette Gingerback, the first name, is derived from lily or lilies, usually representing purity and innocence, which refers back to the found father-child trope I mentioned earlier, and the flower itself can be found naturally in both Europe and North America. Her last name, Gingerbuck or Gingerback, depending on the interpretation, can be a reference to either a ginger buck, which refers to the brown reddish fur you will find in male deer, or Gingerback, as in the color that wolves and coyotes that you can find Native America have in their fur color. Oftentimes, fantasy wolves or coyotes and their werewolf counterparts are named after the type of colored fur they have, like Fenrir Greyback from Harry Potter. Coyote Stark. The coyote part is quite obvious, but it is important because the cowboys of that time often protected cattle, their main opponent, as you guess, from coyotes and wolves. They would usually fend these animals off with revolvers, rifles, and knives. Also, the first ever machine gun was invented in 1884, which is in the time frame that I gave, so Stark's Cerro Machiata makes sense. Naming himself Coyote Stark makes sense, and the name Stark means strong in German. And the wolf motif has various different representations in Germany, so it was hard to narrow it down to what specifically the connection is. Plus, A Song of Ice and Fire came out well before Bleach, so Kubo could have been inspired by the Game of Thrones Stark family from the books. Coyote are also generally singular, lonely hunters, but wolves hunt in packs. This reflects Coyote's name and loneliness, but the wolf pack he summons by separating his soul represents what he wants. Now, I've waited to talk about how I think Stark and Lillynette died. I think he ended his own life due to his solitude and survivor's guilt. The frontier was not kind, and self-deletion wasn't uncommon. Being the last to survive any of the dangerous elements would wear on anyone. And while a vasto lorde to avoid the same fate and loneliness in Hueco Mundo, which would reflect frontier life in the United States, he split himself into two beings. Coyotes are infamously regarded as the animal that will gnaw their own legs off to escape traps. This leads not only to the suicide concept, but also the concept of splitting his soul into two parts. So yeah, Coyote Stark and Lillynette Gingerbuck's original being as a human was probably a frontier cowboy, and their original name may have been a combination of their names like Coyote Gingerbuck. So that's our theory video, and that's all I came up with. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for sticking out. Please like and subscribe. Let me know if you like these theory videos or me talking about character inspirations like Gerard and Gerard Huffnung, the guy who he came from. You know, these videos are really cool and fun. Remember, y'all have a good day. Stay safe. Love y'all. Bye.